Hello everyone, good evening and welcome back to my channel. I hope wherever you are, you're having an amazing day. Let's dive right into tonight's emotional story. I was standing at the top of the stairs, her hand tightly gripping my hair. With tears in my eyes, I begged, "Ava, please let go of my hair. It really hurts." Her nostrils flared as she pulled even harder and shouted, "Say you're sorry. If you don't, I'll throw you down the stairs right now." My vision began to blur from the pain as I struggled and pleaded with her to stop. Then suddenly, I heard Raiden's angry voice behind us. "What gives you the right to grab her like that?" He rushed toward Ava, shoved her away, then pulled me aside. He glanced at my tear-streaked face before turning back and charging at Ava. They started fighting until the sound of the supervisor's footsteps made them freeze. Both of them quickly stepped apart. Everyone feared being punished here. Terrified, I wiped my tears and stood quietly in the corner. Ava, furious, stormed off. This was a welfare center and orphanage. They said one cold, rainy night, much like a scene from a London movie, the security guard found a baby wrapped in a white blanket at the gate. He opened the bundle, saw the baby inside, and ran straight in to hand it to the director. The director, Mrs. Ashrafai, took me into her arms. She once said that from that moment, she felt a special kind of affection for me, something different from what she felt for the other children. From the moment I grew up here, the only person who truly looked after me, who was always there, was Raiden. He had also grown up here, since he was a baby. Those of us who came as infants were generally better behaved, more stable emotionally compared to the kids who had lived with their parents, and were brought here later, often after suffering under abusive stepfathers or stepmothers. Ava's parents were drug addicts. They used to send her to buy drugs from dealers, and when she refused or failed to do it, they would punish her in horrible ways. One of their neighbors eventually called the authorities after discovering what was happening. And that's how Ava ended up here. Her parents fled and disappeared. But once Ava came, she started treating us the same way her parents had treated her. She would demand things, like asking for an extra piece of cake or wanting one of our toys. If we didn't give it to her, she'd lash out violently. No one could stand up to her, except Raiden. They were around the same age, maybe 8 or 9. I was younger, about 6. Ava terrified all of us. She bullied us constantly, and we had no choice but to endure it. If the caregivers found out we had been fighting, they never cared who started it. Everyone involved would get punished. So most of us preferred to stay quiet, especially the calmer or more sensible ones. It was safer to just give in than risk being disciplined. After the supervisor went back inside, I sat down in a corner, crying. Raiden came over patiently, untangled my hair, then sat beside me and said softly, "Why don't you scream? You should shout, so they know what she's doing to you. Tomorrow I'll talk to Mrs. Ashrafai myself. She needs to know how badly Ava's been treating us. Come with me. We'll tell her together. It's not just us. She hurts everyone. If we speak up, others will too. Then Mrs. Ashrafai will have to do something, maybe move Ava or talk to her. Don't worry, she'll fix this. She always does." I wiped my eyes and whispered, "Raiden, last night, Nurse Salihi was watching a movie on TV. I got scared and couldn't sleep, so she told me to sit beside her and watch it too. There was a boy in the movie, he had parents. He was sick, and his dad took him to the doctor. When they came home, his mom made him a herbal drink, but the boy refused and yelled at her. I wanted so badly to tell that boy how lucky he was to have parents, but I couldn't. Why don't we have parents? Why did no one want us? When can we leave this place when we grow up?" He nodded and said, "Yeah, when we grow up we'll leave. I'll get a job." He glanced at my face and added, "I'll get a house. When I have a house, I'll come and take you. He tucked his hair behind his ear. I looked at him stubbornly, without shame, and asked, "Why are you taking me to your home? Do you mean you want me to be your wife?" Embarrassed, he looked down. Breathing deeply, frowning, he stood up. I stood too and said, "We'll make good husband and wife." "Do you know why?" He stole a look at the floor, glanced at me for a moment, then quickly dropped his eyes again. I smiled, and, lost in my childish daydreams, a tooth missing made my face look even sillier. I said, "Because neither of us had a mom or dad. We know how hard it is to not have parents. That's why we'll be the best parents for our child. We'll raise them very well. I'll never leave my child alone. Would you leave yours?" All manly and full of bravado, he lifted his head and softly said, "No, I'll never leave you or our child alone." When he walked away, I smiled and watched him from a distance. I liked him. I was a child, but some people fall in love in childhood. It's not that surprising that a child who is nobody would become attached to someone who takes care of them sometimes. I had become attached too, and I truly, naively thought one day he'd grow up, get a job, buy a house, take my hand, I'd put on a wedding dress, go to his home, and be free from here, free from the place where everyone hurt me. Still standing behind the wall, I was the same quiet, gentle girl. Suddenly Raiden came running up to me, out of breath, and said, "Diana, hurry up, Mrs. Ashrafai is here." To be honest, we kids at the welfare center had very nice names, especially those of us who had been anonymous and brought here as infants. Young nurses who came for training loved picking modern, meaningful names for newborns. Being educated, they picked the newest, most up-to-date, and significant names. That's why all of our names were beautiful, and from childhood I loved the name I'd been given. I remember looking at myself in the mirror, dancing a little and whispering, "Diana, Diana." I don't know why, but I loved my name. When Raiden called my name again, I hurried up the stairs 2 at a time and caught up with him, both of us panting, and stood behind the door of Mrs. Ashrafai's office. I took a deep breath and was about to enter when Raiden put his hand over mine and said, "Don't cry. Why are you so happy and giggly going in? If you act all cheerful like that, she'll think you're making fun of her. You want her to mess up your hair too." I quickly shook my head and said, "No. Seriously, you say it like she'll believe it." After knocking, we waited, and a few moments later we heard Mrs. Ashrafai's kindly voice invite us in. Even though she was very kind, she had a certain presence that made you nervous the moment you saw her. Other nurses or caretakers often shouted at everyone and sometimes raised a hand, but she never yelled, never raised a hand. Yet we were still afraid of her. Raiden lowered his head and said, "Hello, Mrs. Ashrafai. Actually, I wanted to tell you something." She quickly gestured for us to sit on the chairs. We sat down next to each other. The moment I tried to sit, my foot wouldn't reach. Raiden took my hand and helped me onto the chair. Then both of us stared at Mrs. Ashrafai, and Raiden began to speak. "Mrs. Ashrafai, Ava is tormenting us. She asks us to give her our cake. Sometimes she makes us give her our lunch sandwich. Sometimes she throws her ball and orders us to fetch it, and if we don't bring it, she hits us. Ava is rude to everyone. Today, just half an hour ago, Ava grabbed Diana at the top of the stairs, had her hair in her hand, and told her to apologize or she'd throw her down the stairs. Diana apologized many times, but Ava wouldn't stop. I stepped in to help. If we tell the caregivers that Ava is hitting us, they punish all of us together. Mrs. Ashrafai, Ava really is hurting all of us, not just me and Diana, but all the kids." Mrs. Ashrafai sighed, exhaled deeply, and stared down at the tile floor for a few moments. Then she lifted her gaze to speak, but the door opened and Maneshi, slightly flustered, said, Mrs. Oshrafi, a wealthy-looking man and woman, have come here. I think they're from a charity. They said they came without coordination, but they were told to check with you." She smiled and said, "They're my friends. Tell them to come in." Paying little attention to the two of us, she stood, smoothed her clothes, and went to greet them. The man who entered looked about 40. The woman was maybe 35, maybe 36 or 37. They opened the door, extremely beautiful, classy, and wealthy, and entered. They began chatting and laughing with Mrs. Oshrafi, exchanging warm greetings. After the friendly small talk, Mrs. Oshrafi invited them to sit on the chairs. They sat and we both felt awkward. We wanted to stand up and leave, but before we could, Mrs. Oshrafi sat down, and the woman nodded toward us and kindly said, "How pretty these kids are. So Maya, how sweet she is, such a fair and lovely girl. And the boy too. They look related, they're very much alike." I shook my head to say no. Mrs. Oshrafi said, "They're not relatives, but yeah, you're right, they do look alike." How did I not notice? Every time I went on duty and checked the children's room, I saw those two together. Believe me, if they could, they would sleep next to each other even at night. They really look out for one another. Diana's appetite was a little less than Raiden's. A few times I secretly saw her pour a little of her food onto Raiden's plate. I smiled and looked down. Mrs. Oshrafi winked at me, then turned to the couple and said, "Now we'll go. You can look at the children one by one. But let me tell you something. Either choose a newborn so you can raise them yourselves without trauma or a terrible past, or if you choose a child of average age, pick one who is healthy here and whose life can miraculously become good." I'm not a cynical person. I've given my life to this place for many years, from my youth until now, and I've learned what will happen to each of these children. Unfortunately, a child who's been corrupted, a child full of wounds, will have a hard time getting better and will struggle to have a good life. Years ago, there was a boy here whose hand was crooked. He stole. He would take anything. From a very young age, he had gone stealing with his father. His father had sent him everywhere to bring whatever he wanted, and if the boy didn't do it, he was severely punished. Anyway, when this child came here, we put a psychologist with him to talk to him and try to treat him, and no matter what we tried, his hand remained crooked. An elderly, refined couple with excellent financial means came here and said they were looking for a child for their daughter-in-law and son. Their son and daughter-in-law already had a child but wanted another to raise together. They didn't care about the child's size. They wanted someone to nurture. They said, "Why do I have to give birth to all the children myself? I'll raise one more child." Their own child was a boy. They wanted another boy to raise alongside him. In short, they came here, and this boy, his name was Amir, captured their hearts. They said he looked just like their own child. He was so adorable. We'll take him. Since this couple had so much wealth, they certainly had access to the best counseling and support. The woman confirmed Mrs. Oshrafi's words with a nod, and Mrs. Oshrafi continued. They took the boy with them, and some months later they contacted me. The boy's adoptive father called and said they had tried all kinds of counseling and poured everything they had into this boy, but he wouldn't stop stealing. Wherever they went, he embarrassed them and would steal something. Even from the dining table, he would take a piece of meat and put it in his pocket, even though they had prepared far more meat than usual to teach him abundance, so he wouldn't take things for himself. But he was used to the habit, and no matter what they did, they couldn't get him to stop. After a while they returned the boy. They couldn't cope with him. They had kept him for about a year and tried everything, but the child didn't improve, so they brought him back here. It wasn't a good outcome, but that's how it went. My voice trembled as I said, "I'm talking to you, my best friends. Take kids who haven't had a really horrible past, ones who won't hurt you, and won't hurt themselves either. Some kids are just burned. Once they're burned, there's nothing you can do. I've learned that very well here. The man and woman lowered their heads in silence. Just as we were about to leave, Mrs. Ostrafy gestured toward us and said, "These two are some of the most well-behaved kids here. Diana, I really love her. Even chose her name myself. And Raiden, he's a boy, very polite. They both communicate well, emotionally stable, and very sweet. You can choose either of them." Raiden and I were both shocked. He squeezed my hand tightly and whispered, I hope they don't pick us. I don't want us to be separated." I swallowed hard and quickly turned to Mrs. Ostrafy. "Please, Mrs. Ostrafy, I don't want to be separated from Raiden. I want to stay with him. Please. We made a mistake coming here. Ava doesn't bother us that much. We're fine living here, really. Thank you so much for everything. Come on, Raiden, let's go." Raiden, more than happy, jumped off his chair, and we both politely said goodbye before rushing out of the room. We practically ran to the playroom. A few minutes later, we saw the couple walking around, interacting with the other kids, playing and talking to them. Raiden and I sat in front of a giant puzzle, pretending to play, but we kept watching them from the corner of our eyes. After whispering to each other for a bit, the woman turned toward us and smiled, waving her hand. I couldn't help myself. I smiled back and waved. Raiden panicked. "Don't do that, Diana. They'll come for us." I quickly looked away and lowered my head. Moments later, Mrs. Ostrafy called both of us into her office. We were shaking with anxiety. She smiled and said, "They've decided to adopt both of you. What do you think?" I had never seen Raiden cry before, not once. No matter how much he was bullied or what happened, he never shed a tear. But that day, he did. His tears flowed, and he looked at Mrs. Ostrafy with so much emotion that even she got teary-eyed. She hugged him tightly, and they both cried together. Through my tears, I turned around and looked at the couple, the man and woman who stood there watching us with eyes full of emotion. For Boers and Shula, that day they decided to adopt Raiden and me. It took about a month and a half for all the paperwork to be completed. The night we said goodbye, I hugged Ava tightly. That's when I realized people aren't bad. Ava, who held me so tightly, wasn't bad. She had just learned the wrong things in life. Mrs. Ostrafy's words echoed in my mind. Some people burn. You can't save them anymore. You have to let them go. Save the ones who are still alive. I smiled through my tears. Maybe she was one of those burned kids once too. We said goodbye to everyone, Mrs. Ostrafy, the caretakers, the teachers, the other kids. Finally, without taking a single piece of clothing or a keepsake, we left that place forever. Raiden and I got into the car together. I didn't know what was happening, but Raiden touched the car with excitement and said, "This car is foreign. It's so cool." Boers laughed and looked at his wife. She turned to us with a warm smile and said, "We'll have to get to know each other first. Then you'll get to know the house. And after that, we'll all go on a trip together." "Trip?" I asked quietly. "What's that?" She raised her eyebrows playfully. "It means I'll take you somewhere amazing and fun." Boers laughed again. "Shula, why are you suddenly talking like that?" She chuckled. "I don't know. Maybe because I've never been around kids your age before. I'm sure we'll have so much fun together. No more dull and gloomy days. From now on, when we come home from work, 2 little ones will be waiting for us." Boers smiled and said, "And I'll be the proudest dad of these 2. That was the first time I ever felt a sense of protection, a fatherly warmth. When we got out of the car in front of their house, Boers gently patted my hair and helped me step over the stone pavement so I could walk easily inside. And the house, calling it a house wouldn't be fair. It was a palace. Once we went in, we sat politely in a corner. Boers and his wife sat down with us, trying to get to know us. Sheila smiled and said, "My name is Sheila. What would you like to call me? You can even call me Mother if you want." Bors interrupted, "You can call her Sheila June. I think that's perfect." Sheila frowned a little, blinking fast, then nodded and said, "All right." She continued, "I'm 37. I'm a university professor. Why did I choose this job? Because I've always loved children. Even when I was a kid myself, I was always taking care of another child. But sometimes, what you want most in life, you never get. I never became a mother. Never could. In all my childhood games, I was always a mom. Even in my imagination, I was a mom. But in real life, I never got the chance." She smiled softly. Bors is a civil engineer, works in construction. Every morning we go to work, but Aunt Nazaby and a nanny will be here at home with you. We come back around 4 or 5 p.m. Sometimes Bors comes home with me, sometimes he has meetings and comes around 8 for dinner. On weekends, we're always home and can spend time together. I love stories, I know a ton of them, and Bors loves football. Don't be fooled by how he looks. Once he gets a ball in his hands, he's worse than a kid. I giggled and looked at Bors with excitement. My laugh made Sheila glance at him with pure affection. Then she asked, "And what should you call him?" Bors frowned, about to say something, but before he could, Raiden suddenly stood up, threw himself into Bors's arms, and hugged him tight. "I want to call him Dad," he said firmly. Sheila froze. Bors looked completely stunned. Raiden squeezed him tighter. "I swear I've seen you before," he said tearfully. "I've always asked God who my father is. And now I remember, I've seen you in my dreams. I held your hand. I want to call you Dad." Bors's arms wrapped around him, pulling Raiden into a strong embrace. His eyes filled with tears as he looked meaningfully at his wife. I stood up, climbed onto Sheila's lap, and leaned against her. I was a child, but not too young to understand. I could see how much she wanted to be called Mom. I gently placed my hand on her cheek and whispered, "Can I call you Mom too?" We weren't difficult kids. We were kids who wanted to live, who wanted peace, who loved to learn. Whatever they taught us, we absorbed eagerly. We'd gone through so much pain that this place, this home, felt like heaven. And honestly, God really had placed us in heaven. We decided ourselves to call them Mom and Dad, and that decision would later make our lives a lot more complicated. Every morning from 7 to 10, Sheila and I went to the gym together. She always wanted a little girl to take along, and now she finally had one. She'd dress me in the most expensive sports outfits, carefully tying my hair up, putting on a cute headband. I'd act like I was on a red carpet. I'd lift my eyebrows, sip water from the fancy bottle she'd bought me, and copy her every move. After the gym, she went to university. She always made sure her classes didn't start before 10 a.m., so we could go to the gym first. At 10, she dropped me off at home and rushed to her classes. Then I'd wake Raiden up, and we'd have breakfast together, play around the house, and at noon we'd grab our school bags and head to class. We came home around 5 p.m. By the time we changed clothes and washed up, Aunt Nazaby had sandwiches ready for us. We'd just finished eating when Sheila would come home, then Bors, and that's when our happy life became even happier. Raiden would throw himself into Sheila's arms, and I'd run to Bors. God had truly given us two angels. They were so loving, so kind, so full of warmth. I'd rest my head on Bors's shoulder for hours, closing my eyes, whispering silent thank yous to God in my childish voice. Bors loved when I sat beside him, letting his head rest on my lap while I played with his hair. Sometimes I'd tell him, "I'm going to be a hairdresser when I grow up." Then I'd bring my toy brushes and pretend to style his hair. They used to say that before we came, For Boers didn't have the patience for any of this. But after we entered their lives, he became a completely different man. For Boers, the big boss with over 100 employees, would sit humbly on the floor in front of me while I played with his hair. I'd paint his eyelids pink, tie his hair up tightly like a little slick bun, and clip colorful pins all over his beard and hair. Then I'd step back, admire my work, and say, "You look so pretty, Daddy." He'd stare at me with so much love that my little heart melted, then suddenly lift me into the air and throw me onto the couch, tickling me until I couldn't breathe from laughter. On Friday mornings, Raiden and Boers went out to the yard to play football together. Meanwhile, Sheila and I went to the kitchen to make pancakes, fry sausages and eggs, and prepare all sorts of delicious food. Fridays were always special. Sheila did all the cooking herself and told Nazabi, our housekeeper, to take the day off. We'd spend the whole day eating Sheila's food, and I still don't know if it tasted so good because it was rare or because her cooking really was magical, but nothing could compare. Even though Nazabi was a great cook, Mom's food was something else entirely. For the first 2 months, they didn't let any relatives visit. They wanted to get to know us first, just the 4 of us. During that time, we went shopping a lot, bought clothes, toys, decorated our rooms, and did so many fun things. It was like we were finally understanding what life really meant. Every time I sat at the dining table and put a bite of food in my mouth, I realized for the first time what eating actually felt like. And every time, my heart ached for the kids back at the orphanage. I wished I could send every one of them to homes like Sheila's, to families who would love them the way we were loved. After those 2 months, we packed our suitcases. It was time for our first trip. Boers said he wanted us to gain new experiences, to see more of the world. He always believed that since we had grown up in the orphanage and then suddenly moved into their house, we hadn't really seen life outside. Because they were both busy, they couldn't take us out every day, only 2 or 3 times a week, and he thought that wasn't enough. So he said we'd go on a road trip instead of flying, driving city to city, stopping along the way, and showing us new things. That trip became one of the best times of my life. I remember one stop at a shrine. Sheila held my hand and sat with me by the tomb. She placed my hand on the metal lattice and said softly, "Make a wish, Diana. Whatever your heart wants. People say prayers come true here." I looked into her eyes and said, "I wish that every kind person like you won't be able to have their own baby, so they'll go to the orphanage and adopt kids until all the children there find families like we did. I wish every child there could sleep peacefully at night, with no one to hurt them." Tears filled Sheila's eyes as she pulled me tightly into her arms. "Pray that no child ever ends up in a place like that again," she whispered. "Pray that every child grows up with their real parents, with good, loving parents. And pray that everyone who can't have a child, God blesses them with one. Diana," she said, her voice trembling, "I'll love you for as long as I live. You were the first person who ever called me Mom. I'll never forget that. I love you and Raiden so much." As time passed, we grew older. Sheila was busy most of the time with work, but she never stopped being our mom. If she wasn't at work, she was running seminars. As for Boers, he was at work 24/7. Sometimes we didn't even see him at night. He always took on massive projects, the kind that required him and his team to work around the clock. He worked so hard just to be the best in his field. Success was his top priority, and the older he got, the hungrier he became for it. It was like the more experienced he became, the more determined he was to keep going. He had spent years studying and working, and now, in his later years, when he was finally reaping the rewards, he didn't want to slow down. He had dozens of employees, shares in the company, and managed countless projects and buildings. Sheila, on the other hand, was a very social woman. She had always been active in society since she was young and could never imagine suddenly becoming a stay-at-home mom. As I grew up in that house, I realized maybe it wasn't such a bad thing that God hadn't given them biological children. They simply didn't have time for kids. But to be fair, they were so kind, so angelic, that they became the saviors of my and Raiden's lives. They truly deserved to be called Mom and Dad. Every single day in that house, we made new memories together. From the moment Raiden and I woke up until midnight, we were inseparable. Sheila had her routine. She'd go to bed by 9:30 every night, but we always managed to stay up until 12. She couldn't keep up with us. Sometimes we'd wait for Boris to get home just to give him a big hug before going to sleep. Eventually, they introduced us to their family, their siblings, parents, and relatives. They weren't the type to constantly visit one another, maybe just 3 or 4 times a month, but they did see each other regularly. During those family gatherings, Sheila would always introduce us as brother and sister, and everyone saw us that way. But ever since we moved into their home, things between me and Raiden had changed. We no longer talked like before. We weren't really brother and sister, but it also wasn't anything else. It was like we were each other's whole world. We cared about one another deeply, more than words could explain. I loved Sheila and Boris so much, but if someone asked me who I'd choose first between them and Raiden, I'd choose Raiden. Just a little more. And he felt the same. It was my first year at university. Sheila had done everything she could to make sure I got into a public university. Boris had already started taking Raiden to his company, wanting him to learn the business and become his successor one day. Sheila wanted me to become an educated, wise young woman. But unfortunately, I wasn't the daughter she had imagined. I was emotional, dreamy, lost in my own world. During exam season, I wanted to learn to play music and paint, but for Sheila's sake, out of gratitude for everything she had done for me, I focused on my books instead. And I actually got into a public university. It was a freezing, rainy day. When I got home, I was drenched. I saw Raiden by the door, smiled, and said, "Hey Raiden, you're home. Please, let's go out. I really want a coffee. Come on, it'll be fun. Let's drive around a bit and then come back, okay? What do you even have to do at home?" He looked at me for a few seconds and then said, "All right, wait. Let me tell Mom, and I'll come." I nodded quickly. He went inside to tell Sheila that I was back from university and that we were heading out together. Then he grabbed his keys and we got into the car. The rain was pouring down hard. I was softly singing along to a song when he asked, "Where should I get the coffee?" "There's this place at the corner of the street," I said. I've never had coffee from there, but a guy from my class got me one the other morning. It was really good, super frothy. I liked it that way. I noticed his brows furrow a bit. After a few moments, he asked, "What guy? Have you met someone at the university?" I quickly shook my head.
"No, nothing like that.
We just went to buy some cardboard and printing paper near campus, and he said he was getting coffee, so I said I'd take one too. That's all, I swear. Nothing else." Before that day, I had never even thought about meeting someone or not meeting someone. But when he asked me that, I froze for a second. Honestly, no one else existed for me. No one mattered. I looked at Raiden. He was wearing a fitted white shirt. Ever since he started working out, he looked so much more attractive. His hair was curly, he wore a thin chain around his neck, and he looked so happy sitting behind the wheel. I lowered my head, suddenly feeling strange. Why did you look at him like that? I told myself silently, swallowing hard. I looked out the window, but that voice inside my head wouldn't stop. Why did you look at him like that, Diana? What were you thinking staring at him that way? Everyone calls him your brother. I was still lost in those thoughts when he suddenly said something that completely shocked me. If one day you wanted to meet someone, he asked, what kind of person would you want them to be? I looked at him, trying to turn it into a joke, so he wouldn't notice how shaken I was. Who would I even meet? I said with a laugh. And since when are you this jealous? Why are you suddenly so curious about who I talk to? Are you trying to trick me into saying something? We stopped at a red light. He turned to look at me just for a second, then looked away. What do you mean, trick you into saying something? Is there something you haven't told me, Diana?
His tone had changed.
Do you think I've met someone? My whole body went hot. My stomach turned. Maybe he was the one who'd met someone, and this was his way of telling me. Trying to keep my voice steady, I asked, what do you mean? Have you met someone? I remembered there had been a girl once. I never liked her. It had seemed like he had a thing for her. I never asked, though. He raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you want to ask? I panicked a little, shrugged, and said, I don't know. I'm just not the kind of person who interferes in other people's private stuff. He burst out laughing. Private stuff? You literally go through my bag. If I asked you what's in my car's glove box right now, you'd list every single thing. You go through my closet and my phone, and you're talking about privacy? He stopped the car in front of the coffee shop. Before getting out, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, Diana, you're not my sister. Sure, we grew up in the same house, but we're not related. At least, not yet. My heart started racing. I blinked a few times, stunned. What do you mean, Raiden? I whispered. He wet his lips and said quietly, I mean, I can't be with anyone else. You know me. I don't beat around the bush. I just can't connect with anyone because my whole world is you, Diana. When I brushed your hair, it wasn't as a brother. When I take care of you, it's not because I feel like your brother. I've never been your brother, and I never will be.
Don't tell me you see me that way.
You smell my shirts before giving them to Nazabeth to wash. What kind of sister does that to her brother? I felt my face burn with shame. He'd noticed that. I looked down, tears welling in my eyes. He quickly got out of the car and shut the door. As soon as he left, I took a few deep breaths and looked up at the rain, praying that God would free me from this feeling. Because I did love Raiden. And now I realized he still loved me, the same way he had when we were kids. But between us stood an enormous wall, for Abors and Sheila. They would never allow this. Ever. Their reputation would be ruined. They'd be heartbroken. They'd call us ungrateful, say we were just foster kids who didn't deserve their kindness. I knew that if Abors ever found out, he wouldn't hesitate for a second before throwing Raiden out of the house. And Sheila, she'd never speak to me again. To them, we were their children, not lovers. They wanted a daughter and a son, not a bride and groom under the same roof. How could we ever tell them that after years of being left alone in that house, after all the boundaries we respected, now that we were finally adults capable of choosing our own paths, feelings had started to surface between us. When Raiden got back in the car and handed me my coffee, tears started rolling down my cheeks. He stayed silent. Only an instrumental song played softly, mixed with the sound of the rain. The warmth of the coffee cup in my hands felt comforting, its smell intoxicating, but inside, I was falling apart. My heart, my mind, my entire being were in chaos. I had never thought this far before. Maybe deep down, I'd always known that I loved him, but I had buried it out of fear. I had silenced that part of me, until now. That day, we talked about it. Raiden said, there's no need to tell anyone. No need to think about it too much right now. We're together, and we'll always be together. At the end, he looked me in the eyes and said, Sheila and Abors really did a lot for us. They raised us better than our real parents ever could. We always had nannies, we never had to lift a finger, and we found good jobs easily. It's like they took us straight from hell and placed us in heaven. But you know what? We were taken care of, but we were never loved. Not because they weren't kind, but because they didn't have time. The only real love God ever gave us in this world is right here, in this car. We didn't have parents. We didn't have siblings, aunts, uncles. No one ever truly loved us. And then there were two people, rich enough to have everything, except a child. They wanted two people to support them for the rest of their lives. I'd be their servant if they asked me to. But Diana, God made up for the love He didn't give us by giving us this one. Now it's up to us, our strength and our decisions, to protect it or lose it and regret it for years. No matter what happens, we're not going to lose this love. For now, we'll keep it secret until we see what the future holds. God is great, and He's proven many times that He's looking out for us. Do you agree? He asked. With tears in my eyes, I whispered, yeah, I agree. But the day Sheila or Ferbors find out, their hearts will break. He frowned and said, we'll handle that.
Don't think about it.
We're not siblings. Why should their hearts break? What could be better than us getting married and giving them grandkids? It's not as hard as you think. We decided to secretly be together. We weren't just two friends anymore. We had become lovers. There was no physical intimacy, but we held hands, listened to music together, and I would rest my head on his shoulder. He bought me things I liked, and sometimes when no one was around, I gave him massages to ease his fatigue. It felt like we were a real couple, everything except being physically close. About 7 or 8 months passed like that, until suddenly I realized Ferbors had started to suspect us. He began treating Raiden differently, yelling at him for no reason. The same man who once treated Raiden like his own son and was so proud of him. Sheila, on the other hand, kept nagging Raiden about why he didn't have a girlfriend. Why don't you date someone? Go find a girl and bring her home so we can meet her. At the same time, she started pressuring me too. Don't stay home so much, she'd say. Come help me at the institute when you're done with classes. Why would a young girl stay home all day? Sometimes she'd even ask, do you come straight home from university or go somewhere else first? It wasn't like that before. We were sharp enough to know they were suspicious. Keeping it secret any longer wasn't safe. We were both under a lot of pressure. They wanted Raiden to start a serious relationship that could lead to marriage. Before all this, they were open-minded enough to say, even if you don't get married until you're 40, that's fine. But now, they were desperate for him to find someone. Sheila even began questioning why I wasn't in a relationship. She'd say, my students your age have already had 6 or 7 partners by now. We were suffocating. I cried every night, feeling ashamed in front of Sheila and Ferbors, so ashamed I thought I was the dirtiest person alive. When summer came, Sheila suddenly packed my things into a suitcase and said, we're going abroad for vacation. She took me away from home for 3 whole months, separating me from Raiden by thousands of miles. Every night, I called him, and both of us cried. We were so deeply attached. I've seen people in love, and I've seen people who are dependent, but what we had was something else. It was like our whole world was being ripped away whenever we were apart. Near the end of that summer, one night, Raiden said something I'll never forget. I wish they'd never taken us out of the orphanage. I wish we didn't owe them anything. I wish we'd just grown up however miserable it was. At least we would have been free. He said, right now, I could have easily had you all to myself. I'd give up everything, my position, the amazing job Ferbors gave me, the beautiful villa I live in, the car I drive, the clothes I wear, everything just to be with you. I've lived through both poverty and wealth, and I'm not saying this because my stomach's full, Diana. I'm saying it because of how deeply I love you. I can handle anything as long as I have you. If the whole world were placed on one side of a scale, and you were on the other, I'd still choose you. Crying, I said between sobs, me too. but we can't deny how much they've done for us. We need to take another path, sit down and talk to them logically. Tell them we love each other, and that it's not in our control. Love isn't something you choose. We'll talk to them, explain, make them understand somehow. Every day, that's all we talked about. We'd speak fast, plan fast, trying to figure out what to do next. But before thinking about our own feelings, we always thought about Sheila and Ferbors. We didn't want to just run away. They raised us, and now they wanted to see the results of their care. When I came back after those 3 months, we gathered for dinner one night, all of us together. After we finished eating, while everyone was sipping tea, Raiden suddenly stood up and started speaking. He said he had always loved me, that he couldn't see any other girl but me. He said, "There's no genetic bond between us that makes us siblings. Just because we were raised in the same house doesn't mean we feel like brother and sister. We're in love. What could be better than us getting married?
You'll still be a part of our lives.
No strangers will come between us. I'll always respect you as my in-laws, and Diana will too. You're open-minded people. You raised us and did more for us than most parents would. Accepting this shouldn't be something to be ashamed of. We haven't done anything wrong. We're not siblings." His words made perfect sense, to me at least. But before anyone could respond, Ferbors stood up, slapped Raiden hard across the face, shoved him, and threw him out of the house. He even took his car keys, but of course, as always, they were more lenient with me. They didn't throw me out. But for a moment, Ferbors looked at me with disappointment in his eyes. I lowered my head, crying, helpless. Then I locked myself in my room. A few days later, Ferbors sent a message to Raiden, saying, "If you want to get married, come back and marry the girl I choose for you. Otherwise, I no longer have a son named Raiden." Sheila cried nonstop. I was so ashamed I couldn't even face her. I stayed in my room, feeling like I had aged years in just a few days. When I finally managed to call Raiden, he told me what he'd said to Ferbors. He told him that he'd always see himself as a son, would always help him from afar, but if Ferbors didn't want him in the house, he'd build his own life. He thanked him for raising him, but said he'd respect his wishes. Then he asked me not to argue or be stubborn if they threw me out, just stay there until he found a place for us to live, and then we'd get married. I knew it was incredibly hard for him, losing his job, his home, and everything he'd built. And I knew it was just as hard for Ferbors, losing the son he'd taught and mentored, just when he was expecting to see the results of his efforts. About 2 weeks later, one afternoon, I left my room and heard someone crying.
It was Sheila.
She was sitting alone on a chair against the wall, her back turned to me. I sat quietly behind her on the couch and began speaking softly. I remember once, back in the orphanage, a little girl grabbed my hair so hard I thought my scalp was on fire. She was holding me at the top of the stairs, saying she'd throw me down if I didn't apologize. I was terrified. I kept saying sorry, but she wouldn't listen. I wasn't scared of dying. I'd seen another kid fall before. He didn't die. He broke his leg. But after that, he couldn't walk well or even go to the bathroom alone. Sometimes the nurse would lose her temper and hit him because he was heavy and hard to move. That's what I was afraid of, ending up like that. I took a shaky breath and continued. In that moment of pain and helplessness, Raiden came and saved me. He told me that one day, when he grew up, he'd marry me so I'd never have to suffer again. Then, through tears, I said, "Mom, Sheila, we never betrayed you. We never lied to you or disrespected this home. We never crossed any lines. We never broke your trust. I know this is hard for you, having people around talk, whisper, and judge. But what can we do? We've always loved each other. How can I possibly be happy with another man when Raiden has been my whole world since I was 6 years old?" He's my dream, he always was. And now that he's right here, how could I take another man's hand and pretend Raiden doesn't exist? Pretend my heart doesn't belong to him? And this feeling, it's mutual. Mom, Shilla, you raised us. You made us happy. Like Raiden said, you took our hands and pulled us out of hell and placed us in heaven. So, why now do you want to turn our heaven back into hell? I can't marry anyone but Raiden, and Raiden can't either. If what you want is for neither of us to marry, fine. I can convince him to come back home. We'll stay quiet. We won't upset you. But if you want to bring him back just so he can marry another girl, you'll ruin all three of us, me, Raiden, and that girl. The good you've done your whole life would turn to pain. She looked at me and said, and what am I supposed to tell people? What do I say when they ask? My friends, my colleagues, they'll say, she took in 2 children and raised them, and now they want to marry each other. People will talk. Aren't there enough boys and girls in the world for you to marry someone else? You just got attached because you were always together. My eyes filled with tears. No, Mom, that's not it. We didn't just get attached. We tried so hard to deny it, to hide it, to fight it. But we couldn't. 8 months ago, Raiden finally confessed he couldn't be with any other girl. And when I looked at myself, I realized I couldn't be with anyone else either. While I was speaking, I suddenly felt someone behind the wall. I turned, it was Furbor's. His shoulders were slumped. My heart broke. I had always been his little girl, and now I ran to him, threw my arms around him, and cried into his chest. Dad, where have you been? How have I not seen you for 2 weeks? For 3 whole months this summer, I didn't see you. I swear, I'd rather die than live without seeing you again. Please, Dad, don't let your heart break over us. We love you so much, but what can we do? We're in love. We're not even siblings. Who says we are? I've never once told my friends Raiden was my brother. No one could ever believe that. We were strangers you brought home and raised as your children. Why be so hard on us? That night, my words touched them both deeply. Later, I overheard Shella talking to Furbors. She said, "This is a test from God. They've fallen in love. We can't change that. If you're ashamed, then let's take the kids to Canada. They can get married there, and we'll come back."
Who cares what people say?
I've stood in front of students for years telling them to live for themselves. How can I now destroy my own children's happiness just because of gossip? Call our son. Tell him to come home. I miss him so much. It was around 10 p.m. for Bors, overwhelmed by longing for his son, grabbed his phone and called Raiden. He told him to come home so they could talk and find a solution. Raiden, overjoyed, immediately got in his car and drove toward the house. God knows how excited, how nervous he was, because on a curve, he lost control and crashed into a pickup truck. His car flipped over. The speed was too high. We waited. 10 o'clock passed, then midnight. Shala, who always went to bed by 9:30, stayed up anxiously. Furbors kept calling. No answer. No one imagined what had happened. They thought he might still be upset or busy, until someone finally answered the phone. "Your son was in an accident," the voice said. "He didn't make it." It felt like a dream, no, like a nightmare. His death didn't seem real. Life with Raiden had been a dream. I had seen him by my side since the moment I opened my eyes to the world. From the moment I understood who I was, Raiden was there. And suddenly, he was gone. Shilla and Furbors were shattered. They'd lost their son, and they carried the weight of guilt, too. But me, I died with him. They lost a son. I lost my soul. After I tried once to end my life and survived, Shilla fell to her knees, crying, begging me not to do it. "Please don't. Don't do this to us," she said. So I tried to live, Not to live really, but to keep breathing for them. 6 years have passed. I haven't gone back to university. I barely leave the house. When guests come, I avoid seeing them. I've never taken off my black dress since that day. For a bore's aged overnight. Sheila, the woman who is always full of life, hasn't stepped outside in years. Raiden's death destroyed us all. I don't blame them. They understood us deeply. They tried everything. First, they separated us, hoping we'd forget. When we didn't, they fought us. 2 weeks later, they decided to follow their hearts. It wasn't their fault. Fate just wasn't kind to us. Life never wanted happiness for us. So, my dear friends, that's tonight's story. I hope you felt it, even though it was a painful one. Every story carries its own sorrow and struggle. I'm sorry if it made you sad, and if there were any flaws in how I told it. I'll do my best to improve in future stories. Thank you for staying with me. I love you all so much. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment. Good night and take care.